Okay, we're gonna get started. The Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The roll call, please.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Anise?
Present.
Mr. Arcuri?
Here.
Mr. Bova? Mr. Brodsky? Mr. Coyne?
Present.
Mr. Dalia?
Here.
Mr. Ford?
Here.
Mr. Karam?
Here.
Mr. Mutolo? Mr. Sampson?
Here.
And Ms. Sesney? Here. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'd note at this point that this is Joe's last meeting with us.
It's been
So I'd like to thank you for your participation, and I hope you enjoyed yourself.
I did. I hope I was of some service.
You sure were. First item, oh no. You have the October 24, 2022 draft minutes. Is there a motion to approve? Thanks, Rich. Any second, please?
Second.
Thanks, Rocco. Any comments, corrections, deletions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. First item on our agenda, review and approval of the rules and regulations.
So initially, that was going to be, I think, kind of brought forward by our engineer, and this is probably a pretty good time to make a quick notice. I think all of you received an email from Eric Schuler. He was leaving. He left voluntarily for another opportunity. But I think he had headed up a committee to do this. Has this was sent out to everybody in advance?
Yeah, we have it.
Yeah. So Eric, I think, had planned to sort of walk everybody through it, but it's really just some operational changes to facilitate, our ability to get work done. And I don't know if you had a hand in revising those rules and regs or not, but if anybody has any questions, we can try and answer them. There's just some minor modifications. It's not a whole lot different than what we've done before, but just some cleanups to clarify, what some of the requirements are in hooking up a new system, things of that nature. If anybody has any detailed questions, we can answer them. And if you're comfortable with it, great. If you want to spend more time with it, we can certainly table this. If you want to move it to January, it's really up to the board at this point.
I'm comfortable with it.
I am, yeah, I am. There's a lot to digest there. I wasn't sure if you wanted to hear from the engineering department on this at all as some of the explanation, but these changes that are in there have been reviewed by many of us, and I'm comfortable with it. Yeah.
If you're comfortable, I am.
Thank you.
I'll move it.
Rocco moves it. A second.
Second.
Thank you, Carl. Any further questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thanks. Maybe at some point, Pat, if we could just get something about what got, looking through it, it's hard to figure out what was changed or,
We'll do an executive summary, so you know at least the finer points. Yeah, we can do that for you. Just so you know, because obviously you're all out in the community and people ask you questions, and it'd be helpful for you to understand a little bit about what we just did. Thank you. Yeah, we'll do that.
Next would be approval of the extension of contract with what's their names? Veolia.
It's not a musical instrument.
They should be making olive oil for the water treatment plant. So this is what we asked, which we got.
And I'm going to ask Phil, or invite Phil to comment on it in a minute, but just by way of quick background, most of you, I think, knew that we had outsourced our water treatment plant to a company called Suez. When we did that, we did a full-blown RFP process and a very detailed review. We had 3 proposals. Suez had one, but at the time, the company Veolia had submitted their own proposal for it. They're both headquartered in France, and over time, Veolia actually bought Suez. And so the field has narrowed, and Veolia ended up right in the driver's seat where they wanted to be in the first place 5 years later. But we had been negotiating with them for since earlier this year. It took a little while for certain things, but Phil Tancora headed up that discussion. Ken Bobrow is traveling today. Thought he might be here, but he did say that he's perfectly comfortable. Everything that we did has been reviewed by Ken, and Ken has given his blessing to it. The only real change to the entire contract is just in the way that chemicals are being handled and purchased. And Phil, if there's anything you want to add to that, please feel free.
No, so the chemical cost structure and essentially monthly truing up with the authority is one. They're going to provide their own vehicles instead of the water authority providing those vehicles, and we also built in some penalties for non-compliance. So in the future, if there was ever an issue on their end, we would have some sort of recourse built into it from a financial standpoint. So those are really the three, I think, main points of the whole amendment.
So we have the extension in your packet. That's what we are looking.
Right. And by the way, this is a 5-year renewal. As you recall, we switched the operating year. And so more recently, we passed a 5-month extension to the original 5-year contract to get us up to January 1. And it's now going to be on a calendar year to match our fiscal year. And so over the summer, you all voted on and approved a 5-month extension to the prior contract. And now this is the start of a new 5-year term with a renewal point, yes or no, at the 5-year mark, unless something really egregious were to happen, of course.
Any questions or comments?
I have one question. You said that they're gonna be using their own vehicles instead of ours.
Right.
How many vehicles will that free up for us? What-
2, I think, Phil, is that? 2, yeah. 2 trucks we had were ours that were originally assigned to the water treatment plant. We allowed them to use them. Of course, they had to pay their own expenses and gas and stuff, but now they're going to be using their own. They won't be on our insurance. It'll be under their own insurance.
All right, so a little bit of a savings there then.
I think so, yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Someone care to move the motion or move the approval of the third extension, amendment and extension? Thanks, Betty. A second? You have choices, all right.
All right.
Any further comments or discussion? All those in favor?
All right.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. Next item is reauthorization of HR policies, sexual harassment and workplace violence, which are in your packet.
And again, just by way of background, some of you may recall that the Public Authorities Reform Act created a bureaucracy called the Public Authorities Budget Office. And under this whole array of laws that they passed, we have a number of policies in here internally that have been voted on by the board that are supposed to be reauthorized, reviewed and reauthorized every year. And so that's supposed to be done on an annual basis. These two here from our HR perspective are identical to policies that have been passed by the board. There's no change, so it's exactly what you voted on before for the last 2 or 3 or 4 years of renewals. We did make some modifications based on input by our labor attorneys at Hancock and Estabrook, 2 or 3 go-arounds, and nothing's changed since then.
That's what I was gonna ask you. Did the legal look at after?
And they've had no recommendations for the last 2 renewals.
Then I'll move that.
You'll move both of them?
Yes.
A second?
Second.
Thank you, Carl. Any further questions, discussions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. Next would be reauthorization of remote mobile network information security policies.
So these are almost all the same. Jim Mack is here, our IT director, who can walk us through. I think the one change is in the remote access policy. We now require a double layer of authentication, which wasn't there before. Jim, is there anything else that's changed on any of these besides that point? So that's the only thing that changed is on the remote access, company phones, etc. There's a dual authentication layer you got to go through. in case you lose a phone and someone's trying to hack into it. It just makes it more difficult.
I didn't, so we have a VPN and all that set up and.
Yep. So everything else is the same, and these have all been renewed and updated over time, but it's identical to what you voted on last time.
Do we have any outside consultants look at this that specialize to, so we do have a review of that like on a annual basis or?
We usually do it in June. We did it in, I think, August this year. Yeah, we do once a year.
I'm sorry, Pat, that was on the mobile?
The first bullet point there, remote access policy.
That,
Yeah.
and so that's obviously a good improvement.
Yes.
Yeah. And frankly, was required for our cybersecurity insurance policy as well.
And the others remain the same.
Everything else is the same.
Any questions, comments, concerns?
Nope.
Someone care?
Move it.
Thanks, Rocco. A second. They're all over. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. Finance report, Jim?
Yes, you have your October financial statement. I was trying to get you November's. We were working on it today, we just didn't get it done. So I'm going to double up. Our next meeting, I'll have two months worth of November and December. However, things are positive. Water sales, $200,000 higher than budget. Consumption is up close to 8%, primarily because of Wolfspeed. And our cash flow, we're at 1.5 as at the end of October. In November here, or I'm sorry, in December, we just paid our retirement. It was only $2,000 more than the previous year, which surprised me. $569,000. Remember, years ago we were up over $1 million, so things have changed. So that wasn't too bad, considering we had actually budgeted a little higher. And then we're looking in December to fund our reserves. So we're going to need all of that excess cash to pay things at year end. We have some renewals of insurance that we just got some of that back, so we're going to need it.
Any questions for Jim?
How are we doing with shut-offs?
Well, Jim Mack has been keeping a running tab, and since the moratorium expired set by the state, our collections are now up to $2.4 million that we've collected through that whole collection process that we do internally.
And Wolfspeed is paid up, believe it or not.
Speed is current.
That's good.
Yeah. So we're doing well.
Good.
So is it, with Wolfspeed though, with that coming on, are we, what we kind of projected with that income, are we on target now? Or?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, their usage is about what we had forecast. So it's somewhere between $700,000 and $800,000 a year of additional revenue, and they're hitting that mark right now.
So are we, do you think we're going to be safe if we end up landing another company on that site?
It depends on the size of it. As you know, Rocco, from our discussions through Edge, there was a project that eventually landed somewhere else. Senator Schumer was trying to bring here. That was considerably larger than Wolfspeed. To accommodate something that big would have triggered probably about $140 million, $150 million of improvements that we would have to do to keep pace with their growth, and including expanding the treatment plant, finishing up the rest of that new raw water line, tanks at that site, and some other finished transmission line projects. And as we were explaining, just the debt service to borrow all that money wouldn't have even been matched by the revenue. So it would have passed on a rate increase to the rest of the users to be able to do all that, which is why we had, a lot of concerns. Edge, then at one point I talked about getting some additional state money to offset that so that we wouldn't put a burden on the customers. But that project didn't come here. A smaller project we could accommodate with a whole lot less, and it would still be obviously, in our interest to do that. If another project came in the size of Wolfspeed, we could accommodate that without really having to do a whole lot more of extra
I
work.
think there's more, which is going to be more of the type of business.
what I expect as well.
Yeah.
As long as it's something that's going to be in the 1.5 to 2 million gallon a day range, not much bigger than that, then there's not a lot of capital improvement work that we would need to do to accommodate that.
So, and if something like that does happen, that revenue should really be a big boost for us here, huh? By having that second company on.
Yeah.
On site.
Absolutely. Yeah, that would be a good thing. Too big, that would be a bad thing.
So the state is not willing or interested in developing the site in anticipation of anything?
The site's fully developed. It's just being marketed right now, but it all
But I
depends on
mean,
the size
for the-
of
I mean,
a user.
when you have to go to a bigger one, are they willing to put up the money?
Seemingly, Steve DeMio and I and Jim and through Rocco and Ellis in various ways talked about that, and it seemed there was a willingness to put some money on the table to help that happen. So it all depends on how much of that the state could absorb on our behalf and what would be left over. We, based on the size and the revenue and the water sales, we can calculate various break-even points where the debt service and the revenue are at least in alignment. But preferably, we'd like to see the revenue exceed the debt service to help offset.
It's not so much that the state wouldn't want to do it, Vince. It's not so much that the state wouldn't want to do it. I think what they want to do is if the money they're going to be giving, the companies coming in are looking for that money to go to offset part of their construction and all that. So there's only going to be so much money that the state's going to want to commit to it. But
But I know Senator Schumer came and was interested in making a big company come,
Right.
which would have caused us for a big expansion. I just wonder, either the federal government or the state government willing to prepare the site in anticipation of some other big company coming by that they could lure into the, does anybody know?
well, I mean, like the one that went to Syracuse, I mean, that was something that they were looking at over here, but we didn't have the big enough place to house them. So I mean, but I think some of the names that.
At all. And it would have doubled our water use. I mean, they expect to be using 20 million gallons a day, 15 years out. That's our total system use right now. In fact, we don't even draw that much right now, so.
Our ratepayers are not going to subsidize development there. That's what you're asking.
No, I'm not. I'm saying
I'm saying that that's not going to happen.
that's not going to happen. What I'm saying is the federal government, Senator Schumer,
Right.
since he was interested.
Call my good friend, and I'm sure he'll. Didn't they just give money? No, that was New York State. Rome got a nice big chunk of money, and who else did down that way?
Conversations with Edge.
No,
In our conversation with Edge, my remark was if Senator Schumer can drop $60 million in our lap in addition to what Steve was seemingly able to get out of the state, then sure, we could make something like that work. But back then, they were talking 6 million gallons a day, not 20.
yeah, no, I understand.
So, and actually, now that I'm thinking back, I think it was a
You
different
know what I'm
company.
talking about?
I don't even know if it was the same company that went to Salina. I don't think it was. I don't think it was.
Yeah. All right.
So, at any rate, yeah, I mean, certainly, we'd have to look at each on a case-by-case basis, and depending on how much external funding we get, maybe it's a go, maybe it's not, but that's certainly foremost in our calculations.
But hopefully in 2023, it may be a reality though, that we do get another company.
Yeah.
I think so. I think it's a matter of when and not if. So there's some active leads, and we're always optimistic.
Where are we here?
I don't know. What were we just talking about here? Oh, it was a we just finished a financial report from Jim.
Now we'll go to your report.
There we go. Okay. Yeah. No. Rocco asked about revenue from Wolfspeed, so it was a segue from finance to me. Okay. Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, our principal engineer Eric Schuler departed. As I said, he left voluntarily to pursue another opportunity that I think in the back of his mind thought was in the works at some point, but was probably a few years out, and something changed rather quickly, and he was offered something and decided to grab it. So far, I'm in contact with 2 engineers that are both licensed professional engineers. I think my goal is to have a new engineer on board sometime in the next 5 to 6 weeks. Hopefully, not much further than that. I don't believe I'm going to have to conduct a more formal search. I think the 2 people I'm in contact with right now are both fully qualified, and hopefully that's going to work out. So we will have that office filled shortly, and maybe with a little luck, you'll even meet our new engineer at the next board meeting. Who knows?
That'd be good.
We'll see. But I'm working on it, and we do have another engineering vacancy that I have some candidates lined up to look at as well, a lower level departmental engineering vacancy. So we're moving ahead on the hiring front. In your packets, there was a letter written here from TriDelta Resources. That's our disaster recovery firm that they're out by Canandaigua, Jim, right? Canandaigua. And Jim was mentioning that, we do this review in June. We do a whole disaster recovery drill. And Jim, if you want to add anything to that. So it worked well. We're certified. We have confidence if something were to happen and the building blew up or an earthquake hit or there was a major incident that took us down for some reason, we could fire up down there and not lose a whole lot of data. They'll be backed up and current. So that all went well, and we're recertified for the year. It's an annual thing that we go through with them. So this is their sign off on that. The Water Finance Authority, the other board that's associated with the overall organization, the 5-member panel chaired by Vin Gilroy, excuse me, met on Friday afternoon to formally kick off the bonding process. They had been scheduled to meet the week prior, and then we ran into a problem with a quorum. So they did meet on Friday. This Wednesday, Jim and I have a kickoff call with all the consultants. There's a list of about 9 consultants that all come together as a team to help produce the official statement and get the bonds out on the market and sold and deposited into our account. The process on the short side can be done in 60 days because we have the holidays in the middle. It's probably going to be closer to 75 or 80 or 90 days, but we do expect to probably close in mid to late February and have our funds deposited to our account to support the capital projects that this board approved in that request for $9 million. So that process is underway, and as soon as we have that first conference call on Wednesday afternoon, things will really be set in motion and happening pretty quickly. They did retain all the same consultants that did the last bond issue just 2 years ago. So a lot of this documentation isn't being done from scratch. They're just opening up the files, and it's just going to be a lot of updating and modifying. Hopefully it'll go quickly. Wanted to show you 2 quick pictures that I took off my cell phone, which came out okay. They're clear enough to see. We mentioned that in the revised lead and copper rule, we have to identify lead services. We also have to try to figure out what sort of chemical treatment processes can be done to lower the lead levels, and the way that gets done.
Somebody has to clean up that office.
I don't know where that came from. Is that up on the screen? No. What's going on? Come on. Double click.
Small.
Come on. I did double click. It's not open. There we go. So, and Phil can talk more about this, but Phil has been working closely with an outside firm we hired, oddly enough, called Corona Labs. No relation to the virus. But
Or beer.
what we have to do in order to comply with the new lead and copper rule and the regulations promulgated by EPA, which aren't even finalized at this point, right, Phil? I think.
They're final, but they're guaranteed to change.
There you go. So we had to go out and what they call harvesting and pull lead service pipes out of the ground that have been in use for years and years. So we have our own lead pipes, and then working with Phil and the State Health Department and Corona, we'll be testing various ways of seeing if we can tweak the process we do with the treatment plant that helps coat and protect the inside of the lead and also to buffer the water so it's less reactive with lead. And so when it sits in the pipe overnight, the lead levels aren't continually rising. It doesn't leach the lead into the water. And so I wanted to show this to you because this is now down in our Campbell Street facility, and all of this instrumentation was set up in-house by a guy named Steve Donovan who works for us. Steve originally built our first SCADA system, which is all the remote monitoring. That aged out. We hired a company called Brock for $2.5 million to completely rebuild it. That project is about done. And probably at the next board meeting, we'll be discussing that whole entire SCADA uplift project. But Steve Donovan did all of this, and I just thought it was, he did a fantastic job, and it was very impressive. I can't even see the mouse on the screen. There we go. Here's the other photo. A little bit of a close-up. But this is all connected real time. It's going to be recording data with a whole set of parameters for chemical analysis. And then Corona Labs we'll be able to access all this data as it's being generated, and then we'll know if, you know, we add a little more of this, a little bit less of that, what have you, different kinds of trials. The goal is to see if we can comply with the lower lead levels through a water treatment process without having to necessarily tear all the rest of the lead service pipes out of the ground, which could number in the range of 3,000, give or take. We're not even sure yet. We have to verify all that as part of the new regs as well. But if we can achieve it through water treatment and optimize what we call corrosion control chemically, then that would provide us with a lot of relief. So that study's underway. What'd you say, Phil? 15 months, 18 months, maybe?
Yes.
Before we know the final results, and they'll have a recommendation to say, yeah, we think this will help you comply, or it's just not possible with this kind of methodology. But it's underway, and this is all now down at Campbell Street, and all of that was put together by one of our staff in engineering, Steve Donovan. So I just wanted to share with you what a great job he did in setting it up. Phil just gave him, and the Corona Labs really just gave him the parameters and said, here's what we need. He designed all that himself and put it together.
Wow.
So, yeah, real nice job. Real nice job. Really good. So, anyway, that's the update on the lead and copper rule and what we're doing about it. It's pretty fascinating. If you ever want to stop down and take a look at it, we can do that too. Okay. THMs. Most of you know that we had to publicize a minor violation. I consider it a minor violation. Instead of 80 parts per million, we were at 81 as an average over several quarters. It was only at one tank. It was up near the Airport Business Park. It's sampled quarterly, and then they take the running average. And we're good, right, Phil?
We are. We are. We're back under 80, so we're back in compliance. Yep.
So Phil was monitoring it. They were taking samples every other week up there, and it was trending down. The one sample that we actually had to grab in compliance and send out to the outside lab, for some reason, their numbers came in higher than what we were processing, but nevertheless, the official reading for that brought us back under. So I'll be doing something to the media this week to say that minor violation, which we had described initially as temporary, we expected it to be temporary, we're now back in compliance, and the quarterly rolling average is now under 80 again. So we'll put something out there to clarify that. Last thing I wanted to mention very quickly is that on the labor relations front, we've been discussing with one of our unions, the Teamster Union, for a contract renewal. We've been meeting with them. Their contract expires December 31st, and after January 1, they would be without a contract. So our labor attorneys at Hancock and Estabrook have, we had a little ongoing dialogue, and then we wanted to get some board feedback. So we met with the Budget and Finance Committee of this board to get a little bit of feedback. We met with them again on Thursday of this past week, and I do have some information I can share with you, but that would have to be for executive session. So and I think that's it for me, unless anyone has any questions.
Any questions for Pat? Thank you. Any old business? Any new business? We need a motion to go into executive session regarding labor contract negotiations. Thanks, Betty. Second. Thank you, Rich. Any further discussion on that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you.